rude. Right, okie dokie, off you go. Thank you.
Right, so my subject was big. I mean, sorry, my question was Biggie the reason for Tupac's death, or was it something bigger? A little bit of Tupac and his background. He was born, as you can see here, on the 16th of June in 1971. His full real name was Tupac Amaru Shakur. His mother and father are Afeni Shakur and Billy Garland. He was born in East Harlem, and he had a really big interest in poetry, jazz, and acting, which he studied all three, and ballet at Baltimore School for the Arts. And this is where he first found his love for Shakespeare, and he was influenced by Shakespeare with like poetry, because that was what originally brought him into like rapping and writing his own lyrics, because he wrote poetry. A bit of Biggie. He was born on the 21st of May 1972. His real name was Christopher Wallace, and he was born in Brooklyn. His mother and father were Violetta Wallace and George Latour, and he was nicknamed Big in high school because he was, well, overweight. Tupac's first major break came from being a roadie for a group called Digital Underground, and he was also a backup dancer, an occasional backup vocalist for when they played live shows. And his first real recording, which came about with him, was on the Digital Underground song of the same name off their first EP, which was also of the same name, Digital Underground. And then after that, they were really impressed by his rapping skills and thought, wow, he can actually go somewhere. So they asked him to appear on another track on Sons of the LP, which was their second EP. And then in 1991, from this and underground recordings with other, underground artists, he made Tupacalypse Now, which was his very first album. Biggie came about from in high school, he was always rapping. He was always with his friends, at the back of the bus, messing about, rapping with them. And during this time, he recorded a demo tape, and Sean Combs, who other people would know as P. Diddy or Puffy, he got hold of this tape and he listened to it, and he was really, really, really impressed by it. So he had somebody come from Uptown Records to listen to it as well, and then they decided that it would sign him. And then shortly after this, Sean Combs got into a really big row with the CEO of Uptown Records. So this was, I think this came out from Sean was trying to run it himself, but he was only a producer and an A&R. He was trying to run the company himself, but the CEO obviously was like, what are you doing? This is me, I'm in charge of this. So he got sacked from it. And after this he made Bad Boy Records, where Biggie came and joined him afterwards. Tupac was now getting a lot more popular. He was touring, and he obviously already brought out his first album. And Biggie was labelled as one of the new upcoming people as well. So they decided to get them both to be on the same tour, and Biggie was the opening act for a lot of the shows. So yeah, Tupac was really impressed by Biggie's rapping skills as well. He saw a bit of himself in him, and they quickly became friends, and they were attending social events and parties and stuff, and they were just always around each other's houses, just hanging about. And this is one of the shows with Tupac and Biggie, where Biggie joined him on stage for one of Tupac's performances.
Check this out, y'all. That's good. It's that new shit coming out with a new album. Y'all got a homecoming. I feel good about trying.
Video not showing.
I don't know.
What you do, keep your game on.
Anyway. Oh no. Right. Yeah, so after this, in 1994, November 30th, Tupac was asked to by two friends who were part of a gang called the Crips. He wasn't so bad friends with them at this point, but a lot had happened, and these two were still his friends after this dispute with the rest of the members. So yeah, he was asked to guest appear on a track for Lil Sean, and he arrived at the studios, and he got into the lobby lift, and some guys, like, it was 3 people, came up, and they were trying to take his jewellery, like all of his watches and stuff. And he wouldn't give it to him at first, so they shot him a few times, and he was bleeding, obviously, you know, everywhere. But he still managed to get upstairs to the recording studio, where Biggie, Sean Combs were in there recording for this Lil Sean. And he arrived, and they were all like, "Wow, what's going on? Why are you here?" And Tupac thought this was really suspicious because he'd been on the phone to Biggie before. And Biggie did know, but as soon as he came upstairs, he was like, "Well, why are you here?" It seemed really suspicious to Tupac, like, why would he think that I'm not arriving? So yeah, Tupac found this really, really suspicious, and he was taken from the lobby by an ambulance. And at this point, he gave him a bit of a middle finger salute, because he really didn't appreciate the way they were treating him at this. Yeah, and the next day, Tupac had to appear in court, even though he'd been shot the day before. He still arrived, and he was in a wheelchair. He was sentenced to 1.5 years in prison at least, because of an unrelated event where a few months earlier, basically him and his entourage had got into a bit of trouble with a woman in a hotel room, and you can see where it's going. And during this time of Tupac being in prison, Biggie released a song called "Who Shot You?" and there was a few lines of it which Tupac took as a direct hit towards him, saying about how it was Biggie who'd shot him, or had somebody to shoot him. So he saw this as a direct insult, and then he released, as soon as he was released from prison, he released his own song called "Hit 'Em Up." On the 7th of September 1996, Tupac attended a Mike Tyson boxing match, where afterwards, after the match, he'd seen a Crips gang member. As I mentioned before, he'd fallen out with a lot of the members in the lobby of the event. Yeah, so him and a lot of his friends ran over and started beating this guy up, and left him in a bloody pulp, and then left to go to a party where, this is like 45 minutes later, they pull up at a red light, and a white Cadillac pulls up next and fires 4 shots into the car, and they all hit in, 3 hit in non-fatal places, and the 4th hits him in the lung. 7 days later, he dies from internal bleeding from the lung, and there was not much they could do. They tried for like half an hour to revive him, and eventually his mother decided that it was time to just let him go. On the 9th of March 1997, Biggie was leaving the party, and where he was shot, this is, again, 4 shots, 3 in non-fatal places and 1 in a fatal place. And he arrived at the hospital and was pronounced dead. My conclusion is that Biggie was not involved in Tupac's death because he didn't really think anything badly of him. He was just like best friends with the guy, and he always maintained that the "Who Shot You" song was nothing to do with Tupac, and that it was a song that he'd recorded months earlier before this had even happened, although it does seem suspicious of the timing of the release. Biggie's death was very suspicious though, because to me it seems like a fan of Tupac has gotten really jealous of like how Biggie's still carrying on now and how he's getting big. And I think it's really suspicious because it was in the same circumstance that Biggie was killed. I mean, it was at a red light to do with a party, and there was only 4 shots, 3 non-fatal and 1 fatal. So to me that seems really suspicious. So yeah, that's me done.
Okay, thank you very much. Any questions? No? Okie dokie. Thank you.